after his death. I take the New Testament reports of such experiences very seriously. And I don't mean simply that they remembered him and continued to be moved by him, or that his spirit lived on, as we might speak of the spirit of Martin Luther King or Abraham Lincoln living on. I don't mean that. What I do mean is that they experienced him. And I think they experienced him in a variety of ways. Some of these experiences were clearly visions. Visions really happen, and not all of them are psychotic, not all of them are hallucinations. And visions, I might note, not only will involve a visual sense of a person appearing, but they can even involve a tactile sense, a sense of touching and being touched. And thus, I affirm the truth of the statement, Jesus appeared to them. I also think there were non-visionary experiences. I think they continued to experience him as a presence in a non-visionary way, as a presence in the community, as a presence in the breaking of the bread. And I think they continued to experience the power that they had known in him during his life as a historical person. The power of healing, the power to transform lives, the power to create new forms of community. Moreover, and for me this is critically important, I am convinced that these kinds of experiences go on to this day. To this day, many Christians continue to experience Jesus as a living reality. And this is why, for me, whether or not the tomb was empty doesn't matter. Whether something happened to the corpse of Jesus doesn't matter. For as I understand things, Easter is not primarily about something spectacular happening to Jesus on a particular day in the past. It is about the continuing experience of Jesus after his death. This, in my judgment, is the historical ground of Easter. And to relate this to the stories of Easter in the Gospels, I don't think of the stories of Easter as reporting the kinds of events that could have been photographed or videotaped or seen by a disinterested observer who happened to be present. I see them as metaphorical narratives expressing these kinds of experiences and this conviction. Some of them may reflect specific experiences, some of them may be parables of the resurrection. I turn now to part 3, the central truth claims of Easter. And here I'm going to mention 3 that seem most important, most central to me. I will state each in a short sentence and then briefly explain it. The first of the central truth claims of Easter. Jesus lives. This is what I have just spoken about. He is a figure of the present, not simply a figure of the past, a living reality who continues to be known in the experience of Christians. The second central truth claim of Easter, all of these based on the New Testament. God has vindicated Jesus. Easter is God's yes to Jesus and God's no to that which crucified him. And note that I didn't say no to those who crucified him, but to that which crucified him. Namely, to use my colleague Walter Wink's very useful shorthand phrase, what crucified Jesus was the domination system of his day. And of course, that domination system was represented by Pilate as the local representative of imperial power, and by the temple elite, a small group of people at the very top of the Jewish aristocracy of the time. But basically, they were the embodiment of the domination system of his day, a domination system consisting of an economically exploitative system, a politically oppressive system, and all of this legitimated in the name of religion. Easter is God's yes to Jesus and God's no to the domination system. The third of the central truth claims of Easter, a three-word sentence. Jesus is Lord. Now, this is closely connected to my previous claim. God has not only vindicated Jesus, but in the words of a hymn that Paul quotes in the 2nd chapter of Philippians, God has exalted him and given to him the name that is above every name, namely Lord. And thus this claim, Jesus is Lord, makes a further claim as well. The risen Jesus is one with God. He is, to use a New Testament phrase, at God's right hand, and participates in the power and being of God. Easter is not simply about people having experiences of Jesus after his death, as a surviving spouse might have experiences of a deceased spouse after his or her death. 50% of surviving spouses typically have one such experience. But they do not conclude that their deceased spouse is Lord. There must have been something about the early Christian movement's experience of the risen Christ that led them to draw the conclusion that Jesus is one with God, a spiritual reality who shares in the power of God, a spiritual reality who, like God, can be everywhere present in more than one place at the same time. The risen Christ is one with God, at the right hand of God is Lord. And I want to underline, as I conclude this point, that the affirmation that Jesus is Lord has both a religious and political meaning in its first century context, because there were other lords in that world. One of the titles of Caesar was Kurios, Lord. Caesar was also called Son of God, Savior of the world, the one who brought peace on earth, and so forth. And so when the early Christian movement proclaims that Jesus is Lord, they are saying very concretely, the domination system is not, Caesar is not, Jesus is Lord. And I think the affirmation Jesus is Lord continues to this day to have both a theological and a political edge to it. So I move to my conclusion. These then are what I see as the central truth claims of Easter. Jesus lives, God has vindicated Jesus, Jesus is Lord. And so I would say, as a Christian and as a historian, the stories of Easter are really true. Even though I'm skeptical myself that the tomb was empty, even though I'm skeptical myself that anything happened to the corpse of Jesus, I would say the stories of Easter are really true, even though they may not be literally true. Thank you very much.